Hey, big fucking dreamers. So pumped to be here with you today. And today we're going to be discussing internal family systems therapy. And I was actually quite shocked. I looked through my podcast archives for the episodes, and I was actually really shocked that I hadn't yet done an episode about IFS. So, internal family systems therapy, it's also called IFS, if you've heard this. And this is a therapeutic method that has really changed my life. It's the backbone of a lot of the work that I do with my clients in order to get them transformations, kind of be, I guess, more at peace with themselves. And so I first heard about this method when I was doing my life coaching training with Martha Beck, who, if you guys haven't heard of her, she's the absolute fucking goat of life coaching, actually. She's famously Oprah's life coach, and I did her Wayfinder life coaching certification. It was back when this method, internal family systems therapy, started becoming kind of more and more mainstream. But I would say it's still a pretty, not like an underground method, but it's kind of popularized in the podcasting space. Tim Ferriss talks about it. Gabby Bernstein has wrote a really accessible book called Self-Help, which really democratizes internal family systems therapy. So I really recommend, if you're interested in it a bit more, reading that as a resource. But when I first learned about it, I was in my life coaching training, and Martha Beck was explaining IFS and the principles. And I just thought, I need to learn how to do that immediately. It was a method that I just understood and that I felt like my brain could grasp really easily. And I'm going to walk you through it today and also just give you a little bit of guidance in terms of how you can start using it in your life to really deactivate any trigger that you're feeling. This is going to be for you. This episode will be really relevant if sometimes you find yourself like saying, oh my God, I wish a part of me just didn't do that. Like a part of me is super reactive, or a part of me always snaps at my husband when the dishwasher isn't loaded correctly, or a part of me shows up like an absolute raging C word whenever I'm in a meeting with that motherfucker from the office. If you get triggered or inflamed in any way, if sometimes you don't like how you behave, whether that be you kind of have angry outbursts, or maybe you shut down completely and you don't assert yourself, you don't put a boundary in, you really don't like that part of you that feels like, okay, I never stand up for myself. Why don't I do that? Or it could be like I work too hard, or I'm like always go, go, go and can't relax at all. If any of that applies to you, or even if you have ever been triggered. So if you are literally a human being on this earth, then this is an episode for you. AFS, it's interesting. I actually went about it a little bit backwards. First, I learned the method. I took an introduction training, then I took a bit more of an advanced training, and I'm not a therapist. Obviously, I am a coach. So they've actually closed off a lot of the training to people that aren't therapists anymore. There is a coaching training that's available now that I'm desperately trying to get on, but I've done training in terms of introductions to IFS, and then I've done a 16-hour training on top of that, like an IFS deepening training. First, I did that, and then I started working with an IFS therapist. And the reason that I started working with an IFS therapist was because I'd done a lot of deep trauma work. I've been in trauma therapy for years. I'd been working the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and 12 steps and other fellowships. But I still felt like, especially around my career, there was just like some unease there. Like it was like, I was just pushing so hard, always trying, like everything just felt kind of like scratchy and itchy, and nothing was really feeling good. And I didn't really know why. So I was like, all right, I want to try this technique and I want to do it. From there, it's just completely changed the way that I understand myself. It's changed the way that I related to myself. I would say I am like so much more calm and understanding and grounded, and I'm also just not a highly reactive person, really, like at all. Like I go through inner turmoil, yes, of course, but I would say my reactivity has decreased so much as a result of understanding this method and just knowing what's actually going on inside me and putting a name to the part. So I'm going to explain to you the basic fundamentals of IFS and then how you could start using it. So first off, IFS, it's a therapeutic method. It was founded by Richard Schwartz. And what's really interesting is it was actually it was first found with eating disorder clients. And clients would come to him and they would make all of these plans, of, okay, he talks about some patients with bulimia and they were like, okay, I'm not going to go do this. Like they have all these plans set. He's working with them, but then they would come back in and they weren't making any progress. And they would be like, a part of me just really like took over and I got angry. And then all of a sudden, like I ate all this food and then I threw it up. But it was like this different part of me that actually just couldn't stop, but I didn't like the part. Richard got really curious about like who are these parts of us that we have inside of ourselves? What are these parts doing? And what he found was that everyone has all of these different parts, like in like a multitude of parts that live inside of us. And sometimes when people start learning this method, they're like, "Oh my god, am I schizophrenic? Like, I have all these different personalities." But if you ever have seen the movie Inside Out, I want you to think of that because in Inside Out, which is I think it's a Pixar movie, but it's actually the IFS method in a movie, and there was an IFS consultant that was working on the movie as well, advising them on how to do it. In the movie, there's this 13-year-old girl, depending on if you see, Inside Out 1 or Inside Out 2. She has all of these parts. Like she's got one part that's really joyous, one part that's really angry, one part that's really depressed. And she's got all these parts living inside of her, and these different parts are acting out at different times. IFS is really similar in that it is trying to understand who these parts are inside of us. So there are kind of different types of parts. There are parts where they're called manager parts. There are parts of us and they're all called protector parts. And what these protectors are they're parts of us that get triggered in some way. There are two categories of protector parts. There are manager parts, and those are really the categories that I work with as a coach. A lot of my clients' manager parts will be like the super harsh inner critic, the part of them that says no matter what they do, it's never enough. They just got this big award at work. They were globally recognized on the stage at a big sales conference, but then inside they're like, that wasn't, you're still not good enough. Well, you're still not making X amount of money. You have to try harder. You aren't recognized in this place. I have a client who has a part called the golden child. And that's a part of her where, she always has to kind of like be the best, win the awards, like be really recognized so she can be good. Like it's a part that really comes from her for being a good girl. So it's usually these parts that are somehow causing us like pain or suffering or we don't really like in certain ways. I've got really intense manager parts. Like I have like a little dictator part. And that's the part of me that was always just like do more, do better, like really harsh. Nothing's ever good enough. And that's a part that really drove me to burnout. But then on the flip side, I have a part called the sloth monster. And that really is like my chronic fatigue personified, where it's like, oh my God, I'm just gonna shut down, sit on the couch, watch Downton Abbey, eat lint chocolate, like don't talk to anyone, don't look at my phone, like all systems are just an absolute no-go. And so these types of parts are kind of, when I think of manager parts, like the parts that I work like with clients, they're kind of controlling, they're overworking. They sometimes can flip into rage and anger as well of, okay, when someone asks you something at work, then you get super critical, super defensive. One client, and we call her part the red dot. The red dot can actually like really erupt. There have been really disastrous consequences for her when the red dot has come out in the workplace. So then you have firefighter parts. Now, as a coach, I don't really work with firefighter parts. You think firefighter parts are really, they're still in a class of protectors. So again, under protectors, you think protectors are the big umbrella. Then there's two categories of protectors, which are managers, firefighters. Manager parts are controlling, perfectionistic. Firefighters are more like these are addiction parts. So basically, when you think like we need to just numb the system and shut down and get the fuck out of there. So that could be with drinking, that could be with drugging, that could be with gambling, that could be with sex, that could be with shopping. But anything that you're kind of doing in a really like impulsive, numbing way that is really destructive. And with as a coach, I don't really work with a lot of firefighters. When a firefighter is coming out, I will refer people on to either a 12-step program or say, this is actually the work with a therapist. But then what's really interesting is if we look at these protectors, we have to think, what are they protecting? We've gotten these behaviors. Why are they acting the way that they're acting? This is really where the exile comes in. The exile is a part of us that's usually some sort of childlike part that has experienced, let's say, a pain or a trauma in some way. It's young, it's vulnerable, it usually carries a lot of shame and a lot of fear. And then the protector comes in and tries to protect it. And it basically is like, I don't want to feel the pain of this little exile. So I'm going to overwork. I'm going to erupt in anger. I'm going to get fucked up and black out, sleep with your husband. Whatever it is, I'm gonna act out in some way so I don't have to feel this shame, this pain, this grief. And usually as a coach, I also don't really work with exiles. That is the job of a therapist. What I do with clients is we actually just deactivate the manager parts and the protector parts. So something really important about this method is like a lot of people will come to me and they'll say, I don't want to have this part of me anymore. This part of me is causing me distress. It's causing me pain. I just want to get rid of it. Sometimes they'll say, I hate this part of myself. But the goal isn't ever to get rid of your parts. The goal is to actually understand, why is it behaving the way it's behaving? Because it's doing something for a reason, and it's usually doing something to protect you. How can we understand it more? And this is where something called self energy comes in. When you think of self energy, it's not a part, it's just you. It's the essence of you. If you believe in God, it's kind of the God infused part of you. It is like the divine that lives within all of us, and it's unbroken. It can't be tarnished in any way. It can't be hurt in any way. And you can tell when you're in self energy, when you're experiencing what Richard Schwartz calls the 8 C's. So the 8 C's are calm, curious, compassionate, connected, confident, courageous, creative, and clear. I also just had those on a screen because I always forget one of them. When you're experiencing some of these 8 C's, that's when you're in self energy. You want to actually bring your self energy to the part and just get really curious about it. Why are you behaving? And like almost ask it in a dialogue, like the way that you're behaving. You really ask the part, kind of ultimately, all the work is really just to ask the part, what do you need from me to stop doing this behavior? So, what do you need from me to stop overworking, to stop telling me that I'm not good enough, or to stop, getting really angry or aggressive in meetings with your colleagues or with your teammates or whatever it is? Once we can start to understand why the parts are behaving the way that they're behaving, because they all have histories inside of them. They all are like have their own little lives and their own personalities. And some of my clients, when they look at their parts, like the parts can be really visual. They can like see the part very clearly. Other times my clients like are kind of like, okay, maybe this part will feel like a bit of an energy or a bit of a squiggle, or it could be, a color. This part is yellow. Sometimes your people are visual, sometimes they're not. But you really want to say, like, why are you behaving the way you're behaving, and how can I help you? How can I help you stop doing this? And the really cool thing that happens with these parts is they actually transform over time. And that's the goal, especially in level 1 of the life and work transformation, which is really like the backbone of my program is IFS. Because what we want to do is we want to understand which parts of you are triggered, like are activated and are triggered. And those parts are the ones showing up in your life, in your career, stopping you from getting to where you want to go. But how do we work with them to actually transform them in a way that really supports you and supports your goals and supports your dreams? So, for example, my little dictator, that is a part that has been, like I've had burnout because of this part. Like it's kind of always told me that I was never good enough. This part has transformed into actually a part that is really discerning, really looks at my schedule, decides, do I take on this project? Do I take on this speaking engagement? Like, is my schedule too much? How do I create room for myself? So, this part of me that was once kind of driving me toward burnout now is a part of me that is actually really helps me decide what I bring into my life and what I don't bring into my life. And it actually like is a part that helps me, put in boundaries, and is a part that really allows me to say no. So the goal is never to banish a part, or the goal is never to make a part go away. And sometimes that's what happens in positive psychology, where you just will ignore the part of you, or you'll be like, I'm just not going to open that part up. But then it always comes out in different ways. It always comes out sideways. You're like, okay, I'm not going to scroll on my phone anymore, like the part that doom scrolls, but then you're just like eating a bunch of chocolate. So you kind of can't really shut down a part and just put it on a shelf, it will always come back to you in some way. So really what we want to do is find a way to relate to yourself in a different way. So many cases of clients who are just like completely different people because of their understanding of their parts. And I'm thinking of one client as well who she is, she's really quite fluent with her parts. And we've got like an entire catalog of them. And I'll be like, was this the head engineer? Was this the golden child doing this? And she's like, no, it's actually a new part. This is the new part. This is what it's doing. We know her part so well that we can begin just talking with them and working with them almost as if they're separate people because they have separate reactions. But the goal is to really bring self energy to your parts so that you're not activated and that you're not triggered all the time. A lot of this is nervous system work because it's being able to get you calm and deactivated so that you can do what you want, so that you can have these good relationships, so that you can have this career that you want. And so in level 1 of my program, like really what we do is like, it's really like mapping the parts. It's understanding who they are, who are the main characters here, what are the main characters doing, how can we bring self energy to them. Then in level 2 of my program, this is something that like is called parts polarization. So sometimes you will have parts of yourself that like you'll have a part of yourself that you've got to be the best. You've got to take on all this like all these projects. You have to like take on all this work. Like you have to, you want to make President's Club. By the way, President's Club, if you're not in the sales world, it's like usually the top 10% or top 5% of the sales force of any company that gets rewarded with like a super bougie trip. And it's a highly sought after and coveted thing that most people with a lot of trauma are really attracted to, just to be frank. Like it's a and I've like been in President's Club. I've like, was always striving for it. It is like a tool that companies use to get more work out of you to become more profitable, but it is a reward and, it can be viewed in a different way. So your parts could be like, I want to get to President's Club. I want to do a lot of projects. I want to, do X, Y, Z in my career. And then you could have another part that's like, I'm fucking tired. I want to sit on the couch. I want to like rot in a hole. I don't want to talk to anyone. I want to just watch The Wedding Planner and like binge on, I don't know, like salted covered pretzels, whatever it is. And these two parts can often be at war with each other. So in level 2, a lot of the foundation is parts polarizations, because what you want to do in that moment, and this is kind of like more advanced IFS level theory, where it's like you want to notice when parts are at war with each other, when parts are fighting with each other, how do you bring yourself energy so that they can talk to each other and deactivate and actually work together in your system? I look at this as almost like parts work is really the antidote to self-sabotage, because if you think about, where you want to get to, but then like I know for me, a lot of my self-sabotage like comes in the mode of overworking. And I like overwork a lot and then I get into these feast famine cycles. And that's gotten so much better since I started doing IFS, but it's still something that is always in the background for me. Like it's still probably something that, I need to I'll have to monitor and watch until it gets completely resolved in my system. But it's so you can stop doing these behaviors that are causing you inner turmoil, that are causing you inner pain, and you can be in a place where you experience more of the 8 C's. So you're in your self energy more. You feel, calm, connected, curious, courageous, creative. You feel like you are compassionate. Like that's what we really want. And that's also when the best work usually comes out. Recently, I was talking to someone who was thinking about building a business and going into entrepreneurship and leaving tech. And I had this conversation where I said, well, yeah, you can build a business, but if you don't actually kind of resolve the inner turmoil that's going on within you, like the perfectionist tendencies and the workaholism and the extremity and the all or nothing thinking, then you're just going to be replicating the same thing that's going on in your tech company, but in entrepreneurship. And so what happens is that if we don't resolve what's going on inside of us, this will just follow. And it doesn't matter if you get a new job or if you start a new relationship or if you, think that something's going to be the be all end all, if you think that some change, or you move to a new country, or you move to a new city, and you're like, this is the thing that's going to cure me. If you don't resolve these parts inside of you, they're just going to keep acting out in certain ways. So we want to know and talk to them and deactivate them so that your system can be in more peace. Another thing that I kind of think was missing in the IFS theory, and this is what I built in level two, because what happened is a lot of clients started seeing like a lot of success with IFS. And one of my clients said to me in a session, he was like, we talk about all of the kind of quote unquote negative, not that a part can be negative. A part can be in distress, a part can be activated. There's no such thing as like a negative part. But he was like, we talk about these parts that are causing me a lot of distress and turmoil, but we don't ever talk about, like, he was like, I want to call upon my good parts, like the parts that I really like the parts of me that are really positive. So then I started thinking about how this theory is actually missing that. So I created this in level two, where I said in level one for my clients, like, we catalog all of your parts. How do you get the things that you want? Everyone's in harmony, la di da. But then what about the parts that aren't really self energy, but the parts of you that are quite directive, the parts of you that are super creative, that you like, and playful, and how do we bring more of those out? Even this morning, my wedding's coming up, and I'm getting a second look created by this amazing designer, and oh my god, if you don't follow me on Instagram, definitely follow along, because you're about to like see a lot of my wedding. Like, my wedding outfits are so fucking lit. I am so excited for them. I was at a fitting yesterday for my skirt. I actually won't give too much away, but I was in a fitting yesterday for my second outfit, and I'm doing a swing dance at my wedding. And we had like, basically, the first skirt that she made me, I was like, I won't be able to dance in it. We actually need to do a second skirt, which is like more of an A line. Because so I'll be able to dance in it freely. We're also changing the material, the silk. I went and tried on the outfit yesterday, and the skirt wasn't an A-line skirt. It looked unbelievable, but it was not an A-line skirt. And I was like, "Well," and I went with a friend, and I was so excited to show her my outfit. Like, it just looked so amazing. But then I left, and I tried dancing, and I couldn't really move around. And the whole purpose of us creating a second skirt was so that I could dance in it. Previously, I would have had like a people-pleasing part that would have been really afraid of confrontation and didn't want to do it. But this morning I was like, right, great. I gotta call her. And so I called on one of my empowered parts, my part that really brings a lot of energy, my part that's really like a bit of a boss, quite directive. And I was like, I love the skirt. It's really gorgeous. I'm so excited for my outfit. However, the point of making this new skirt was so that I could dance in it freely. And it wasn't an A-line skirt. So can you let it out enough so that I can move, or you're going to have to create a new skirt? And she was like, don't worry. She was so lovely about it. She was like, don't worry, I'm actually going to cut a new skirt. Like, I decided that yesterday. We're all good. But it was that I didn't shrink from it. And so this is something that I do think is missing in IFS theory, which is calling on the parts of yourself that are powerful, that are direct, that are playful. How do we call those into life? That's like part of the methodology that I do in level two. To sum up here, to give you kind of like an IFS overview. First, we start with self energy, part of you that is unbroken, unburdened, can't be damaged in any way. You can tell when you're in self energy because you're experiencing the 8 C's. But then what happens is we have these parts that come up. So if you think about your self energy, it's the sun, right? And then it's always present, but then sometimes there are clouds that come through, and there are clouds that block out the sun, or there's a big rainstorm or a lot of lightning, and we can think that those are our parts. And then within parts, we've got manager parts, those are your harsh inner critics, your controllers, your perfectionists. And then we have firefighters, those are your more addict parts. They really numb the system. And they're protecting exiles, which are these younger parts of you that experience trauma in some way and carry a lot of shame and fear. So the protectors don't want to feel that. So then they come out with this maladaptive behavior. So the whole goal of IFS is to understand these parts so that you can calm your whole system down, so that you can really work in harmony with yourself. You're not fighting with yourself. You're not at war against yourself. It's a really like, in this method, sometimes people think that they'll just say, this is just how I am. I'm just like angry, or I'm just a flake, or I'm just, a bitch to this type of person, and there's nothing I can do about it. And what's happening there is that you are really blended with your part. So you think that you are the part, but what IFS does through actually naming the parts is what is called unblending. So you're recognizing that this is not you, it is a part of you that is doing something, and you're actually creating distance between you and the part. You're creating distance between the part and the behavior. And that distance can give you pause and give you space to really bring self energy in, to understand that, okay, this isn't me. This is a part of me. This is a part of me that's doing something that's causing me pain in some way. How do I bring it care, bring it tenderness, understand why it's doing this? And I've just gone through this year, for whatever reason, I've experienced a lot of sickness, a whooping cough, which was really nuts because people aren't vaccinating their kids. And anyway, it's this whole thing. I won't get into that. I whooping cough, and then I had the flu, and then I experienced kind of post-viral fatigue. And yesterday, it was my first day working out in a few weeks. I went to a Pilates class, and partway through the class, I started getting really anxious. And I was like, oh my God, am I gonna get sick again? I felt like a body ache. And then I was like, went into an automatic fear response. Because I've done this method, I went in, and it was like, this is like in Pilates classes, we're like, I don't know, doing like squats or something on our reformer. And I'm like, I'm like having a little IFS session with myself. And I'm like, okay, where's the part? Okay, it's like this scared little girl who's like super tense. She's super afraid of getting sick. And I was just like, it's okay. It's okay. If I get sick, I'm going to take care of us. If it's too much for us, you don't have to do this behavior right now. Like, what do you need? And I just imagine this little girl. I like put her on a couch, put a blanket on her, like put some popcorn there, like put a show on. And then I was like, great, you're taken care of. Now I can come back to my Pilates class. And then I felt just completely relaxed because I knew that if something happened, and let's say, I had a regression and I was like sick, then I would take care of it. But it's letting these parts of us know when we're activated and when we're triggered that they are not alone with their pain. They don't have to carry all of it. How can you deactivate them, relate to them, show them kindness, show them compassion, so that you can then get on with your life and really like understand yourself more, but also do the things that you really want to do. Go to that Pilates class, show up in the boardroom, show up in that meeting, and not have, often these parts of ourselves are quite young as well. So what will happen is like a 4-year-old part of you or a 7-year-old part of you is the one that's showing up in a meeting with your boss, and is the one sitting there in your performance review kind of like pissed off and sulky that you didn't get a high enough rating, or maybe you're in a rage about it. And that part of you is super young, and they're the ones that are like dominating your life. So you don't want a 4-year-old or a 13-year-old or a 15-year-old running your life. And that's usually what I see with clients, especially the clients with kind of more extreme parts, is they're really young, they're super unregulated. So we have to, you know, like deactivate the parts so that they can really achieve their big fucking dream, so that they can go ahead and do the things that they want to do, but in a calm state where they have a lot of nervous system regulation. In summary, this is like a technique. And also, I just want you to know that if you feel like you have parts of you that are intense and that are extreme, just know like you're not broken. This is really quite normal, but also there is a solution. If you want to know more about this method and how it can transform you, like let me know. This is definitely, the life and work transformation is starting again on October 31st. So another round is opening soon. This is like pretty much the lens that we see the entire program through. Level 2 is more through parts polarizations. That's only available for level 1 graduates. Uh and this is a method that really can change your life. And if you have kind of more extreme parts, so more like you're kind of going into extreme rages, or even if there's drinking or addiction of any sort, I would say go like find an IFS therapist, because they can really help you with that as well. So big fucking dreamers, thank you so much for being here with me today. DM me if you love this episode. I really love hearing from you. I love getting DMs from the Big Fucking Dreamers community. And I will see you in 2 weeks.